So good morning, everyone. I will be chairing the meeting today. Just a quick question. Is there any new members? I don't have any recorded, but in case there is anyone new here that hasn't introduced themselves, please make yourself known now. And if not, we can step on to the next portion. No? Okay, perfect. Didn't see anyone new. So our presentation today will be by Dr. Pardon me if I do butcher your name, Murat Ünal, is that correct? So he'll be leading a presentation, and I think he should be able to share your screen and kind of go over that. You are from SONEAN, correct? Or you're presenting on SONEAN and their vertical integration, or their industry vertical, AgCUMEN.
Thank you so much for your invitation. My name is Murat. I'm currently in Frankfurt, and the company I'm representing is SONEAN. I've actually created a presentation for you, so if you want to take notes, that's really up to you, but I have all the slides already sent to you, so you can have a look at it later on as well. I'm not sure what I should focus on today, but I thought I'll give you some background about SONEAN and where we come from. Some of you might have seen us online somewhere on the internet in relation to LinkedIn already. And in a nutshell, we are an ecosystem intelligence firm. And what that actually means is that, let me just see. I will start the presentation. What that actually means is that we look at ecosystems or entire industries as complex systems. So when we started in 2015, our understanding was, why don't we create a single language platform that allows our clients to actually detect challenges and opportunities across the entire world almost real time, without having the complexities of multiple languages, of unconnected data. And for us, an ecosystem, like an industry, as in the case of agriculture, is a complex system where we actually need to understand not just the individual components making up the ecosystems, but also how they are connected. And I'll show you later on how this actually drives our day-to-day work. And when you look at our timelines, I don't want to go into all the details here, but when you look at our timelines, we started in 2015 with one of the largest agricultural machinery and technology companies in the world, and have since then been their intelligence backbone globally across 190 plus markets. And the thing is, we were in stealth mode until 2022. In 2022, we said, well, we have done so much work in agriculture and related technology. Why don't we open up with a vertical company dedicated only to that area? And agriculture for us is not just agriculture, it's really the entire ecosystem in which it's embedded. It's the whole climate change discussion, it's alternative energy, it's alternative engines, it's space tech, it's literally everything that intersects with agriculture. So we introduced AGCUMEN in a test market in Australia in April 2022. And AGCUMEN is our dedicated entity, which in 2024, we will for the first time launch globally then. So while AGCUMEN stands for agriculture and technology and the related ecosystem, SONEAN looks at multiple industries. So for example, right now we're taking on the largest material handling and automation company in the world. And it's not just agriculture and technology that we look at, but multiple industries that we are active in. In 2015, when we went live, the German government, the Ministry for Economy and Energy, designated us as innovative young company. The interesting thing about this is, though, that we were not really open to the public up until literally this year or last year. And AGCUMEN for us is not just the provision of intelligence about the agriculture and technology space worldwide, but it's also providing our customers basically weekly intelligence, highly customized special reports, but also help them in strategy development and implementation. Now, I don't want to go through all the details, but what does it do? When we started our initial agriculture and technology related project back then, our clients typically needed 4 to 5 weeks on average to research matters, whether they did country reports, customer reports, client reports, technology reports, whatever it was. And we were able in those years, over the years, basically to reduce that time to a few minutes or seconds in some cases, because we started connecting data in a unique way. I'll show you later on what we mean connecting data. And our customers not only have access to our web-based intelligence, which is customized to their needs, but we also create special reports. So we've been involved in multiple billion-dollar takeovers in the past few years, where we provided back-end intelligence, literally to investors, to OEMs, and all kinds of players within the ecosystem. And we help them, obviously, in defining strategy and implementing it on a global scale. We ended up with huge cost reductions too, because customers were able to free up a lot of resources, which typically went into global intelligence. So for example, one of our clients went from $8.6 million a year, literally, to a 6-digit amount, just because they did things differently. Now, just a short feedback about our shareholders. I'm a majority shareholder. The CEO of the consumer bank of Barclays, Tobias, is a co-shareholder. We founded the company together, and 13% is currently with SONEAN. And one of the reasons is because this year, for the first time, we will actually open up and take on a strategic investor. For us, a strategic investor is someone who has actually a stake in the industry and who can basically, with us, develop the platform on a more global scale. And for this, we have actually started discussions already. And the beauty of the company so far is, although we were in stealth mode, we were actually able to, almost generate a double-digit million amount in Canadian dollars in revenues in the past few years. When we started SONEAN, we had a lack of basically skill sets. And what we created back then, over 10 years ago, was the Network Science and AI Lab, which helped us to basically train people from across the world in not just network science, but also in artificial intelligence. And they are basically spread out. We have students at McGill, at the University of British Columbia, and all over the world, from Sydney to Edinburgh. And our team is basically spread out, which basically helps us to cover multiple time zones. What happened with SONEAN moving to AGCUMEN was, we said, we have gathered over 60 million analyzed signals over the past 8-9 years. And we have such an overview of the ecosystem and how those companies are connected. Let's open it up in the next phase and also allow other organizations along the entire value chain to tap into the data. Today, we started with a network. I remember the original network model of the agricultural space was around 2,000-3,000 organizations in 2015. Today, we monitor real-time 60,000 plus organizations, core organizations in the ecosystem worldwide. So any organization from OEM to startup, to intermediary, importer, distributor, dealer, to producers, to governments providing subsidies, to suppliers providing drivetrains, all kinds of tech, they're all part of the ecosystem monitoring. And what does monitoring mean? We basically use our network models to inform our indexation search engine about where to look and what to look for. And with humans in the loop, we're basically monitoring on average about 150,000 unique signals per week coming from all over the world, identifying the opportunities and threats for our customers. But while we're doing it, we're also connecting data in a very unique way. And I'll show you in a second how we're basically doing it. So we are now opening up this knowledge base and that service also to policymakers, government entities, research organizations, OEMs, etc. As I said earlier, agriculture is not just agriculture for us. It's literally climate sustainability, the entire discussion about carbon emissions related tech, alternative engines, whether we're talking about hybrid, electrified, hydrogen, and obviously alternative energy forms. They're all part, and we are even monitoring the construction and machinery industry, because there are now about 800 global players in construction and machinery that cross-sell into the agricultural space, from wheel loaders to skid steers to all kinds of technologies. Now, when we start typically with a client, we develop an initial model in a customized way of the client's ecosystem. That's different for AGCUMEN because here we're using a standard service. But we generally start with an initial model by monitoring the primary sources of those organizations. When I say primary sources, we're really tapping into organizational social media, organizational websites, etc. And one of the reasons is obviously we don't want to basically be exposed to all kinds of fake news, etc., but also want to go to the core of the information where it originates. It's interesting to see when you have 60,000 core organizations across the world. Currently, we monitor about 750,000 primary sources, which are all kinds of local websites. So, for example, a large OEM might be active in 40 different countries, but we are monitoring 40 different countries and all their local communication. Our clients don't have to worry about Chinese, French, Turkish, or Italian because we're translating back in a very solid way all that data into the target language. So they only search in one language. And based on those developments around the world, which we connect, so it's like a giant knowledge graph. You have all those organizations that are connected with each other. We know those organizations, we know the relationships, and whenever something happens, that relationship changes. A new signal is basically being added. And all those information basically change our model. And the insights are then fed into a web-based solution that our client can also use 24/7. And I want to show you how this ecosystem development process works, because when you start with monitoring an ecosystem, you're not just monitoring, competitors. Our original client, in their ecosystem, they were monitoring 60 organizations. Today, we're monitoring 60,000 organizations. Because in your ecosystem, you have to basically wonder what's going on with your suppliers, whether they provide components, software, intelligence, hardware, parts, whatever it is. We've seen how important it is during the Corona period. You have to worry about multipliers. What are NGOs doing? Universities that come up with latest technology, who's tying up with them? All kinds of major associations, banks, the media. But you also are interested in what your customers are doing, the cooperatives, the farmers, the contractors. What kind of machineries do they buy? What are they planning to buy? Producers, other agricultural entities. And it turns out there are many non-agricultural entities that actually buy agricultural tech, for example, airports, municipalities, and even construction companies. You want to know what's going on among your competitors. Tractor manufacturers, sprayer manufacturers, beta, etc. And obviously, very important among your intermediaries. We're monitoring about 20,000 core intermediaries around the world. So every intermediary, importer, distributor, dealer that is involved in the process that is selling ag machinery, whether it's robotics or anything else, you actually want to know who is basically aligning with whom to. So the basic structure of the network model comes from a stakeholder model. But what you then do is, because networks are dynamic and they are subject to changes, every development that we pick up every day changes those network models. Companies go bust, others merge, others buy machinery, sell machinery, get on a new intermediary. Those network models are basically changing on a day-to-day basis. So we have a 5-head team that basically monitors all those developments since 2015, literally, on a daily basis to adapt our models and the data as well. And the ecosystems that we are looking at can be very different from country to country. I'll show you later on whether you're looking at the Canadian ecosystem or the Australian ecosystems. Players will differ, their relationships and the ecosystems in which they're embedded will basically also differ. And to make that ecosystem intelligence work, it's really important now to connect that network model to daily developments. So organizations are structured underneath this stakeholder model, but then every organization is actually connected to signals, to countries, and all kinds of other organizations. So I'll give you an example. If there's a latest alliance between two OEMs, it creates a link between those two OEMs, and the link is basically defined as an alliance. So we also tag the relationship, we define the relationship. And this is basically seen here. Now that you have the stakeholder model, and here, let's say, the core is a tractor manufacturer. In their ecosystem, so many signals are happening on a day-to-day basis. These signals can be related to companies. They can be legal developments, strategy-related developments, alliances, corporate finance activities, market entries, reporting numbers, corporate M&A activities, digitalization-related projects, or even human resources-related developments. So, for example, for us, it's really important to know whether companies' employees go on strike or their board members are changing, etc. So we monitor that too, because it tells a lot about a company at all levels. We also monitor campaigns, whether intermediaries come up with barter trades, discounts, cashbacks, new financing campaigns, gifts, extended warranties, product bundles, whatever, because we want to understand how are those products actually positioned by the intermediaries in the respective markets. It gives you a lot of insights about, not just the intermediaries themselves, but also their relationships to the OEM. And obviously, we're monitoring sustainability-related issues, subsidies, subsidized loans, tax incentives, etc., and all kinds of other signals. So in this monitoring, there's a tagging framework, which is like 4 major categories. One of them is related to subsidies, one of them related to companies, one of them is related to campaigns, to sustainability in general, but also to technologies. And whenever a development takes place, let's say I'm selling to a major cooperative in Zambia, and John Deere just entered into a major relationship there, that creates a relationship between that cooperative in Zambia and John Deere. But we also have information about, the number of machines sold, and that relationship is for us a realized machinery purchases because someone actually bought the machines or someone is testing the machines. So we are also interested to see who's actually testing machines, who's buying machines, who is aligning with whom. And that's how we basically tag all our signals. In short, this is what a typical dashboard can look like. I can also later in the Q&A lead you through the online version of it, which is hosted by Salesforce. What we basically do is we have all developments in one overview. And what happens is when I select, for example, a company, like here in the search text, I go for AgroIntelli, the software immediately looks at all connections of AgroIntelli, gives me on the right-hand side all the signals related to the company in a single target language. But it also gives me in the middle the entire ecosystem of companies that AgroIntelli is embedded into. Competitors, intermediaries, universities they work with. I can click on each and every organization like ABMEC and get immediately all the data about the relationship between AgroIntelli and ABMEC. The map shows me the countries in which they're active. I can click on Australia and get immediately the ecosystem of AgroIntelli in the Australian market, who they work with, the dealers, potentially where they test and so forth. And the most popular tags that help us to actually guide through the signals can help us to get to information very quickly. So for example, I would go to a tag like reporting, click on reporting, and then immediately get the information of AgroIntelli, the latest one. So this is what a typical signal would look like. So when I click, for example, on the 9th of July, 2023, the headline, the translated headline is red numbers at the robot manufacturer again. Then I see, based on the latest data, that they actually reported a loss of 4.3 million last year. And this comes on top of the losses of 4 million the year before. So what basically happens is that the data that gets connected with the organizations, because the relationships are clearly defined, I can now look at each and every tag, whether it's related to a machinery purchase or a market entry or a latest product launch or a latest product upgrade, or whether it's related to subsidies that they might have received. And then I can immediately get all the relevant information with regard to that individual company. I wanted to keep it short here at this stage. This is basically what our clients typically use 24/7, but more importantly, they receive customized intel every week, totally customized to their needs, whether it's an Australian company going global or a US company going global or a policymaker wanting to identify the right technology. we're basically developing, based on our standard AGCUMEN solution, a customized version which they can then use in their respective context. At the end of the day, we just want to empower companies with proper intelligence to just make better informed decisions. And it turns out now we're currently looking after 26 global brands in the agriculture and technology space alone. And they're all non-competing. So we make sure that, you know, we don't work with directly competing entities with each other. They are across countries, they are investors, they are consultants, they are government-related entities. And so they don't really overlap. But what they have in common basically is that they receive the intelligence from us. So far, as I said, we were in stealth mode, but next year we will open up, or this year we will open up AGCUMEN basically more in detail. I'll just open the floor up to questions. I guess you might have a lot of questions.
Thanks for your presentation. I think it's interesting to see how connected we are, like online, and how that can be summarized up into a single site. And you know, thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's anything you would like me to focus on specifically, just let me know.
Quick question, just for clarity. What is the source of all your data? It appears to be publicly reported data in the news or on websites. Is that true, or do you have other sources of data that are proprietary?
We don't worry about news so much because news data typically lags, or a lot of news outlets don't really cover what's going on out there. But we currently in agriculture and technology, we have about 750,000 of primary sources. So think of the 60,000 organizations across the entire value chain, from drivetrain manufacturer to robotics company. And they all basically have their own primary sources. They have their own websites, they have their own organizational media, they have their RSS feeds, they have their YouTube channels. And that's what we focus on in a machine-based way. So our indexation search engine is informed by our network model. The network model indexes according to the centrality of that organization, that specific niche across the world. And the moment basically a new entity comes up, let me give you an example. For example, John Deere just opened up their collaborator program, and one of the companies obviously might be from the US or Canada, etc. They might not have been on our radar before, but now they are part of the ecosystem because they're connected to John Deere. If CNH, for example, teams up with a Canadian company because they do sustainable baling technology, that sustainable company or that startup is immediately on our radar. It's connected to the network, and we immediately start monitoring activities. And this is how we're basically doing. It's interesting to see how much data is actually publicly available. Specifically, we have realized that about 95% of our data, most companies actually don't have. And this goes back to the fact that we monitor also intermediaries. And when you monitor like almost 20,000 intermediaries across the world, like the big ones that are also active in Canada, like PFG, for example, and others, or Brandt, which is very active in Canada, they communicate sometimes very differently than the OEMs which they work with. So you're picking up data across the entire value chain, across all communication channels and multiple markets. And it's also interesting to see that a lot of the companies communicate very differently depending on the jurisdiction they're in. So for example, Titan Machinery, which you all know, is also active very strongly in Eastern Europe. They're also active in Ukraine. They're active in Bulgaria. And when you look at their communication, the respective countries, it deviates a lot from, for example, their kind of communication in the US. So in a nutshell, it's literally the primary sources of all those organizations. On average, you have about 10 to 12 primary sources. And we do news kind of as a backup, but we have realized that most of the news, and this is what basically we've seen, is most of the news channels either don't pick up on a development in 95% of the cases, because it's just too peripheral. For us, it's very important, you know, when let's say a new technology comes out and a producer in Australia is taking on that technology that's very relevant to us, but it might not be newsworthy for a local media. And that's why we focus on primary data. The beauty is also we don't have to worry about fake news, because it comes directly from the source of the individual entities, which also, by the way, includes governments, it includes ministries, it includes all kinds of bureaucrats. We're also monitoring, for example, about 4,000 core universities for their latest innovations. Innovations for us are very important. We have an innovation layer. If there's anything across the entire value chain coming out from a university anywhere in the world, we want to know, even if it's just at the idea level. So we want to really detect innovation early on. Why it's important for clients to engage with universities, partnerships. You want to understand who's engaging with whom. For example, when you take John Deere in the US, the core universities they engage with is Kansas State, Iowa State, Purdue. Why? Because many of their graduates are nowadays in their board. But when you go to Germany, you will see that the University of Kaiserslautern is more prominent. In Australia, it's going to be University of Southern Queensland. So all those relationships across the world differ by ecosystem. And that's why when we connect signals back, we connect them also to the individual countries and organizations.
Perfect. I see Evan has his hand up as well.
Yeah.
I'll be brief. I'm conscious of time, but again, you know, we've been in contact for quite some time. So I really appreciate your presentation today. And I wondered, could you share with the group how best to engage with you from this point on? Is it, you know, it's obviously an email to contact you, but what sort of structures do you have in place for early engagement of new prospects or new clients or partners that are perhaps in North America? And then how does it roll into a longer term relationship? I understand maybe bespoke custom reporting at the start and then move into a subscription model perhaps, but perhaps you could describe that a little bit for the people online.
What's interesting is all our clients we started with in 2015 are still with us. And what we've realized that over time, the intelligence actually gets way more sticky and more important, because as you connect more data in a customized way, it saves so many resources. What we've learned in our test market in Australia, you remember our plan was to introduce AGCUMEN into the Australian market, and we tested it with our local clients. What we have found out, it might be different in Canada though, is that I think a minimum cooperation should include like the daily, weekly intelligence that we pick up on a global scale. It depends obviously on the organization and their global outlook. It might be a policymaker, it might be a university, it might actually be an intermediary like Brandt or someone else, or even an OEM or a startup that wants to go global. But what we realized in our relationship with our Australian peers is that they need guidance. So one thing is providing this incredible solution which they can tap into, but the next thing they ask for is, the customized intelligence. But also what we've realized is they really want guidance in entering new markets, because, well, we can go into any market very flexibly. And if we have 5 minutes time, I can show you in the original solution and map out the entire ecosystem and all the players within seconds. And that's very new to them. But the next thing is, since we also have access and we are somehow embedded in those networks, what they're asking for is, hey, why don't we work together? Because we really need someone on the ground to help us in the process. So what we wanted to do originally was provide AGCUMEN as a web-based solution so that people can access it, through a subscription model, etc. But what we realized is that clients actually want more. They want the customized intel. For example, here our client was related to the wine industry, and we started setting up an entire dedicated monitoring for vineyard technology as well. So, and that's very important to make it as relevant to the client as possible. So I think it's just a discussion about what the needs are, and then basically take it from there.
Fantastic. I saw Dan Bath had a question. I don't know if you still do or. We should be able to field one more if you did.
Sure, yeah, I just wasn't sure if we would have time. Cool, thanks. Great presentation. It's really interesting work. And from what you described as your process, it's very you're building a network, but I wonder also have some way of weakening edges, either with a pay function or, I mean, I guess companies would be less likely to report severing ties than building them, but I wonder if you can comment on how dynamic the network is in terms of both growing edges, but also shrinking them.
Oh, actually, it changes every day. So for example, based on the kind of, we can actually aggregate those micro developments to macro developments. Some of you might have seen our posts on LinkedIn, and there we typically just aggregate micro developments to macro developments. So for example, we want to know what are the latest corporate M&A activities in a certain region, or which major OEM has exposed itself to startups, etc. And there's really a lot happening. So for example, one of our colleagues has now done a very, let's look at a more analytical work, which we're going to publish next week in Australia. It looks at what are the factors that actually determine sales of OEMs across the world in the past few years. And it turns out when we look at correlations among different developments, corporate M&A, corporate finance, and precision technology related activities turn out to correlate most highly with those factors. And these developments literally take place on a day-to-day basis. So we monitor around 150,000 signals per week in over 50 plus languages. What we also do then, that's very important, in our database, every development is unique. We don't have duplicates. When you do a Google search, in 98% of the cases, you will have duplicate information. We don't have that in our database because we eliminate all the duplicates. In 98% of the cases, for example, there's information that came out in Germany, but now it's also communicated in Sweden. For us, that's the same information, unless there's a nuance of difference and we merge those informations. For example, yes, CNH might launch a new product in the French market, in Germany, and let's say in Turkey at the same time, but we figure out, oh, the engines are actually different because they've adapted it to local needs. For us, that's just one news. But then in the news, we summarize what's going on. And this is very important for you to know. Every signal that ends up with the client is actually summarized by a natural language speaker. We don't really rely on machine translation only. Machine translation is only 60–70% accurate, but we have humans in the loop, natural language speakers, that make sure that we have 99.9% accuracy. And every information is also verified by the sources, which we basically put together. So you can always go back to the original sources and verify them. And those networks are really changing on a day-to-day basis. What we, for example, realize is we've communicated this in the first few months, or in January, that insolvencies have picked up. And when there's an insolvency, there's a high likelihood of a corporate takeover, or the company will finally disappear if no one buys into the organization. And what's most interesting is to basically aggregate those developments over time and then compare those developments. For example, we can look at what is the rate of corporate M&A activities targeting startups in 2021 compared to 2022 and 2023. And then we can actually also quantify those changes over time. And this goes back to the network model, because whenever M&A activities pick up, or new product launches pick up, or precision technology related introductions, robotics, whatever pick up, we can actually quantify it over time as well. Because what it basically means is that in a particular year, the corporate M&A activity within the network, for example, was used to basically define a relationship between two entities. And if we have more corporate M&A activities in this year, obviously it also means that there's been a growth. So we can actually, by looking at those developments and changes, also see how those networks change over time. You can even quantify, relationships. For example, we could go into the database now and say, okay, what are the latest companies active in the Russian market after, let's say, the Ukraine invasion? And then you can compare it to the previous companies, and then you will see dozens of new Chinese companies going into the Russian market. You see how the structure of the network is changing, and you can literally quantify it immediately because you know, oh, there are now YTO, Zoom, Neon, and all those players entering the Russian market. We even have the numbers because when we look at the reporting numbers, we realize, well, the market share of international players has gone down from 80% to 8%, for example, in telehandlers. And now all those Chinese companies are coming in. So by linking data with each other, quantitative as well as network data, you actually get quite a good overview about changes over time.
And is the structure of the network quantitative? How do you set the strength of the edges between nodes?
Oh, well, that's interesting. What we can do is the following. For example, let's say we take the robotics ecosystem in Australia, the network tells us immediately who the core players are, obviously. And core players can come from universities, from robotics companies, from OEMs, from all kinds of areas or organizations involved. So the centralities within the network gives us an idea about the relevance of those players in the network, because the centralities of those players are based on the frequencies of relationships they have actually entered into. So what we are arguing is that if a startup company, let's say, enters into a relationship with 10 producers and they're all testing that relation or that machine, and they're quite central within that network, let's say in Australia, they will basically pop up depending on what we basically select. And it's network frequencies. It also gives us an overview about emerging players coming into the network. For example, if a startup collaborator, SVG, let's say SVG Thrive picks out 3 or 4 new players in the Australian market. And you see then they start, taking on an A series round or a B series round. They take on new clients, they enter the US market. You can actually, for each and every company or organization that you're looking at, see the entire trajectory from first day when you covered them in the network and all the signals that define it, including all the countries they have basically opened up, the kind of clients they're working with. And that's the beauty, because ultimately the underlying structure is a knowledge graph. So you have organizations connected with each other and connected to signals that really find those relationships on a regular basis. But the entities are verified and the relationships are standardized by us. And this is why we use the tagging framework, because we want to know, is this relationship about a market entry? Is it about a product launch? Is it about a product upgrade? Is it about a corporate M&A activity? And that basically helps us. So for example, I can go into the database, type in robotics, I get my entire global map of 2,000 plus companies in that space. I pick Australia, I see the entire robotics ecosystem, and then I can see, well, what are the frequencies of those companies? The higher frequency ones with the higher degrees will be ranked on top. I'll see, oh, Swarm Farm Robotics is a relevant player. I click on Swarm Farm Robotics. I see the entire ecosystem in which they are embedded. The latest news tells me now they want to go into the US market. And they're also looking at, raising a latest series or whatever. So I can actually go from macro view to the individual organization because the data is highly connected. And I can also search the data by all kinds of search functions. I could say, give me all companies in the world that are in de-reading, for example. And then it will map out the entire landscape for you with all the relevant developments. This will not only include robotics companies, but also traditional, mechanical de-reading technologies, or some that are basically enhanced by cameras, etc. So when we talk about agriculture and technology, we're looking really at the entire agricultural machinery industry, including even grain silos, livestock related technology, used in poultry or whatever, because our clients basically range from tractors, harvesters, to silos, to livestock tech, really across the entire value chain. And we kept it as broad as possible.
That's great.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. We will be sending out your presentation if anybody does request it. Eventually, we will upload that on the website, but I'll talk on that a bit later as well. We might be able to field some more questions if we have more time, but I'm just going to go through the rest of the agenda now. So conferences that have happened, there's been the Guelph Organic Conference, the Lower Mainland Horticultural Conference in British Columbia, and the AgTech Conference in Quebec, or that's coming up, sorry, on the 6th of February. But I do believe the last two Chuck was at. Chuck, did you want to give us any updates or a recap of those?
Well, I think I'll, a couple of things I wanted to mention is that there was a presentation done, and Thierry and I talked about this a little bit at Syracuse that involved cover crops and potentially robotics and some of the impacts in the production system. So I think at some point we'll share some of that information. I did go to the Pacific Ag Conference in Abbotsford last week, and I'll touch on a couple of things. The first is Simon Fraser University has an organization called BCCI, which is, that's what they kind of nickname it, but it's the BC Center for Agritech Innovation. And what they're doing with that is they are connecting small and medium-sized enterprises with researchers, government, whatever, to develop some solutions. So it's similar to what we're doing here with our Innovation Farm Network and with the working group. So I made some connections with BCCI when I was out there. They were very happy to have me at the event. They're one of the ones who sponsored my trip out there. So so I think at some point in the future, we'll keep that in mind. One of the other things that I came across while I was out there was there were two research projects, which I think could be interesting projects for us going forward on the innovation farms. And one of them was using no-till cropping systems. So they did a project that was in cabbage, which we don't have to do it in cabbage, obviously, but they had some interesting results. As well as, kind of related to what I talked about earlier, they did some work on the interseeding of cover crops in broccoli, and what the robotics fit nicely into the management of those systems. And again, that relates to the work that was done by Rutgers. So that was interesting. The other thing that was interesting was and some other people of this working group this might be old news to them, but there is a North American soil health protocol being developed with a bunch of organizations across North America. And I thought that was an interesting approach for our innovation farms when we're doing our soil testing. And essentially this group is trying to figure out what are the key metrics that we want to track and how should we track them and monitor them over time. And this relates to, testing management practices, carbon building, sequestration, all these kinds of things are related. So I kind of think as a group, we might want to, on the innovation farms, ensure that we meet those protocols that are being set up so that the data can be shared, kind of across the continent, essentially. So I was going to reach out to Paul and LG and some of the other members of the OMAFRA team. They're probably already aware of this group, but I think I want to make sure that they are. And that way on our innovation farms, we're not making up our own system that's, isolated from the rest of the planet. So I think that was interesting. And there were some other presentations on, kind of standardizations and farm research protocols as well that are being looked at, which again are similar to what's being done, what we've done in the past. But the idea here is, if we're doing a project here in Ontario, if we do it and if we follow a certain protocol, that it'll be accepted by other jurisdictions. That was kind of the gist of it. in general, the Pacific Ag Show was probably twice the size of the Niagara Fruit and Veggie Show, maybe even 3 times the size. It's quite a big show. It was very wet in BC when I was there. No snow, there's concerns about flooding. And I saw acres and acres and acres and acres and acres and acres and acres of blueberries. There's just a tremendous amount. And if anybody wants to move to BC to start farming, land is about $150,000 an acre. So if you think we got it bad here, there's way more competition for land in British Columbia. Agriculture is very diverse, both the crops that they grow and also and who they have it. Who they have farming is very interesting to see the makeup of the farmers. So that was interesting. So that was kind of one of the highlights of the trip.
Fantastic. So other events, like I was saying, AgTech is in Quebec on the 6th of, the AgTech conference is on the 6th of February in Quebec. Then there's also the Canadian Agri-Food Automation and Intelligence Network. That is on the 12th of February in the Ottawa Westin Hotel. Then we also have the British Columbia Organic Conference on the 16th of February, the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Convention, which is on the 21st to 22nd of February. And then we have the IFAO conference, which will be on the 21st to 22nd in Kitchener-Waterloo at the Crown Plaza. And then a meeting is being set up for the Farming NG with the Ontario International San Francisco Trade and Investment Office as well. I think there's a link out to that. And then the New York State Organic Summit, which will be on the 3rd to 5th of April in Syracuse, New York. Project updates. We are hopefully going to have our website up and going soon. So everything will be recorded on all of these meetings. You'll be able to view that there. We'll have summaries, and then we'll also have research data that will be going from our projects up there as well. So that way it makes it a bit more accessible. And if you did miss any of these, you can come back to it. New projects that we're working on is a possible data subcommittee. This way we can ensure that the data that we are collecting is accurate and is what the industry needs. And then funding opportunities, we have Agri-Innovate, which is currently open, I do believe, and then the OMAFRA SCAP funding for Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership. And then we also have the AgriTech Innovate initiative, which is now opening, I do believe, as well. I was just getting into reading that originally. Then there are a couple other funding opportunities. I know applications for the biosecurity initiative, they're being accepted and they'll be closed on the 6th of January in 2025, but I do believe it's subject to the availability of funding for the initiative. The Ontario Agri-Food Research Initiative, the first round is closed now. And then we have a couple other ones, but I'll just go over those quickly. And I'd like to go to the round table just so we don't run out of any time. Does anyone have any items they'd like to bring up? Oh, Kristen.
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. I just wanted to mention about the AgriTech Innovation Initiative. The actual applications will open on the Agricultural Adaptation Council's website on February the 15th. You can also go there to find out qualifications. There's 3 different tiers for that funding, so take a look at it. I think it will be heavily subscribed, so get your applications in if you have a project that you're hoping to do.
Thank you. Chuck, you had a question as well?
Well, I was going to comment on the that initiative, the ATIP, the new ATIP program that Kristen just mentioned. If we have any growers that are interested in doing something, let's get ready ahead of time. Like, don't wait until the 15th to start reading the application and finding a grower. I think it's really important for them to start reviewing the general qualification is out now. So if if you've got people in your Rolodex that are interested in looking at doing a project of some kind, like now is the time to start looking at it, not not later. So that's just something coming up. I do have a couple other updates. I have had a couple of meetings with Tavel. So just an update on the apple harvester. So I met up with Itai, and then I also had a meeting with Yanov, the founder, and the rest of their team in Israel. And so that project, they met with Itai, met with a couple of growers when he was here. That went very well. And then I have also talked with a couple of growers, more locally, and they're also very interested in having that technology come. Kind of where that project is at is they are unsure that they are able to build a harvester for us. So they're trying to consider whether they can bring in the American one. And that is one of the pieces of the kind of pieces of the puzzle. The other one is some commitment of funds. Obviously through the innovation farms, there is some funds that we can put towards this project. The growers that I have talked to, I have asked them to put some funds toward the project. And so the idea of this is going to be a 2-year trial of the Tavel harvester. Ideally, we would like to get 2 harvesters, just in case one of them breaks, and then have them in different varieties of apples. So that's kind of where this is at. So for those of you who are interested in kind of following this project, I think, send us, keep us kind of posted. It's going to be interesting. They're going to make their decision, I think, around the end of February, as to whether they can actually have the harvester here for this year. The plan is to have these 2 harvesters here for the kind of the 1st of July, and we will be looking for a technician to help them run these harvesters. And so I think this is something that from a researcher institutional perspective, we're going to need some help finding a person who can run these harvesters. We will have to send them likely to Argentina for training. That's where their first harvester is being deployed. They would like to do that first so that the technician can learn how these machines work. That would likely happen sometime in April or May. So I guess if people are interested, kind of keep me up to date on that. The other project that is underway is I met with New Peak Robotics when I was in BC, and they have built a working prototype of a strawberry harvesting robot for inside of a greenhouse. They actually trialed that greenhouse apparently in Leamington last year. I have no idea what the success rate was. I don't think it was very good, but it does. They are interested in bringing that robot back to Ontario. So if anyone is interested in working on bringing that strawberry harvester to Ontario with me, I think let me know, and we can put that through. The kind of the difference with the New Peak harvester compared to Tortega and some of the others is that this harvester removes the stem, whereas all the other strawberry harvesters that are coming on the market leave the stems attached. And there's quite a difference. It's a lot more challenging to remove the stem on a strawberry than some of the others. So this is an interesting piece of tech. And then the last thing I'm going to say before I'll shut up is the University of Windsor has basically completed a 2-acre trial research greenhouse facility down in Leamington at partnership with Gem Farms. So I went and I toured that yesterday. They are also interested in doing work outside of the greenhouse space, in robotics, and in technology. And essentially, this the same thing that's happening with Waterloo and some of the other schools. The automotive funding for all the automotive side is kind of over now. Like there's only so much more we can do with cars. And so a lot of these engineering schools and programs are trying to move into the agricultural space in terms of robotics, mechatronics, automation, sensors, these kinds of things. So we do have that capacity now in the Southwest and some space in the Southwest to do some trial work on sensors and cameras and these kinds of things, lighting, that kind of work, if there's some interest. That's all I'm going to say.
Fantastic. Is there any other items anyone would like to bring up or questions?
I
No?
just had a question in the chat. Chuck, did you update the OAG with your discussion with the tie?
Not yet. I'm going to do that today. I've been away the last couple of days.
Okay,
So,
awesome. Thank
yep.
you.
I have a question too, Chuck. Do you know what is the performance of the strawberry harvester?
So it is. They have some capacity ratings. It's very slow at this point. What they're looking for a trial is they're looking for somebody who has at least 5 acres of greenhouse strawberry, like indoor strawberries, to work in. And the reason why they want that size is that the harvester is not going to be in their way, so it can kind of stay in one row and pick. So I sent some notes out. So like Ansel's not super keen on giving out exact capacities, but it is slow. He said it's not commercially ready. Similar to the Tavel apple harvester. Like it works, but it's not fast.
I got it. Thank you.
Chuck, do you know where they actually trialed it the first time in Leamington?
I believe that it was with Peak Wiring.
Oh,
That's what
not
I
Gucci?
thought. Oh, sorry, Mucci's. It was with Mucci's. Sorry. But I don't know
Okay.
which Mucci. I don't know.
Well, I probably know.
If there isn't any other questions, I think we should be done then. We'll see you back next week.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Can you three just stay on?
Yep.